So you want to start a startup. In most of the world, you're told that all you need is a great idea, a laptop, and the courage to quit your job. But what you actually need is a co-founder who won't sue you, a lawyer on speed dial, and a very understanding landlord. That's not even a joke. But on the bright side, when your startup fails, you get to call it a learning experience on LinkedIn, in perfect corporate English. If you haven't guessed by the title, starting a startup is actually very easy, even if you think your idea needs a genius-level IQ and a rich uncle. If you compare the barrier to entry to literally any other big life move, buying a house, raising a kid, becoming a doctor, you're actually massively overpowered. When people like you and me say we want to start a startup, it means a bunch of things. We want to build something people love. We want to be our own boss, ideally while still making money. We want to disrupt an industry to prove our old boss wrong. And also, we kind of just want to say I'm a founder at parties. The problem is, most startup advice on the internet is so vague and motivational that even if it works, the only people who could actually follow it are Steve Jobs and a golden retriever. And if you instead look for specific advice you can actually use right now, this is what you get. Follow your passion, fail fast, just ship it, find your why, hustle harder. These things sound good. But at some point, you have to actually build a product people will pay for. Besides, even in the past, there have been founders who started in a garage, slept 4 hours a night, and somehow it worked out. So what can you actually do before starting a startup that's not just the same 5 slides from a pitch deck template, copied and pasted from a 10 Steps to Success LinkedIn carousel? The main thing you need to do is talk to people, not your mom, not your best friend who would definitely use that. Strangers, people with no reason to lie to you. Here's the problem. Most founders build first and validate later, which is like buying a wedding ring before you've had a first date. The idea feels real in your head, so you assume it's real everywhere else. It isn't. It's real in your head and possibly nowhere else on Earth. The move is to find 10 to 20 people who actually have the problem you think you're solving, and ask them how they currently deal with it. Not would you use my app? Everyone says yes to that. Ask what they're already paying for, already doing, already frustrated by. If nobody's spending time or money on the problem right now, you don't have a startup idea. You have a hobby with extra steps. Once you know the problem is real, you don't need an MBA to go after it. You don't need to read 40 books on venture capital before writing a single line of code. You only need to know about 20% of the knowledge to get 80% of the way to a real business. This is the founder's version of the learning curve. A little bit of legal knowledge, a little bit of basic finance, a little bit of sales, and you're already ahead of most people who never start at all. The catch is you actually have to use it. Reading about how to close a sale doesn't make you good at closing a sale. The only way you learn how to sell your product is by trying to sell your product, getting rejected, and figuring out why. No one has ever learned how to run a business by watching a video about running a business, including possibly this one. Once you've got just enough knowledge to be dangerous, there's a fantasy every new founder has, where they spend 6 months perfecting the product before anyone sees it, because they're worried people won't take it seriously if it looks unfinished. This fantasy is why most startups die with a beautiful landing page and 0 customers. The actual move is to build the smallest version of your idea that still solves the core problem, even if it's held together with duct tape and a spreadsheet. If your product is a scheduling app, your first version can be you personally texting people their appointment times. It's not scalable, and that's fine. Because right now you're not testing whether you can scale, you're testing whether anyone actually wants the thing. Which brings us to the part nobody warns you about enough. If you can't handle rejection, a startup will make you very good at handling rejection, mostly against your will. Investors will say no, customers will say no, your old coworkers will say no when you try to recruit them for equity instead of a salary. This is normal. The founders who make it aren't the ones who never hear no, they're the ones who keep going anyway, and treat every no as free information about what to fix next. While you're collecting all that rejection, you also need a plan for money before you need one. Figure out how long you can survive without a salary. Figure out what your actual monthly costs are. Figure out at what point you'd need outside funding, and start those conversations before you're desperate, because desperation is very easy to smell in a pitch meeting. Doing this kind of unglamorous math up front gives you the most protection, because it means you're building the business with real numbers instead of vibes. If you don't have real numbers yet, make your own worst-case scenario and plan for that one, so anything better than the worst case feels like a win instead of a crisis. Now, somewhere in all of this, you'll probably start thinking about a co-founder, and everyone tells you to find one who's smart and passionate, which is the startup equivalent of a dating profile that just says, "I love to laugh." Every founder is smart and passionate. That's not the filter. The actual filter is, can this person tell you your idea is bad without you wanting to fight them? And can you do the same to them? Can they handle 6 months of no income? Do they disappear when things get boring, or only when things get hard? A co-founder relationship will outlast most marriages in terms of daily contact. And unlike a marriage, there's no built-in cultural pressure to work through the hard parts, instead of just quietly ghosting the company. If you can't find someone like that, it's genuinely fine to start alone. A mediocre co-founder is worse than no co-founder, the same way a bad roommate is worse than living by yourself and slightly overpaying rent. You should also expect the idea itself to change and not treat that as failure. Almost nobody ends up building the exact thing they started with. Some of the most well-known companies today started as something completely different before pivoting into the product that made them famous. If those founders had refused to update the idea, you'd have never heard of the company at all. This means the goal isn't to protect your original idea like it's a sacred artifact. The goal is to protect the underlying problem you're trying to solve and stay flexible about the solution. If your users keep using your product in a way you didn't expect, that's not a distraction from the real business. That might be the real business quietly introducing itself. Through all of this, every founder eventually discovers dashboards, and then every founder eventually drowns in dashboards. Signups, page views, social followers, email open rates, it's a lot of numbers that feel productive to stare at and mostly aren't, because most of them don't tell you whether your business will survive. Early on, there's usually just one number that matters. Are the people who try your product still using it a few weeks later? Everything else is a vanity metric wearing a business casual outfit. If that one number is bad, no amount of traffic or press coverage will save you because you're just pouring new users into a bucket with a hole in it. If that one number is good, you can be bad at almost everything else and still have a real business on your hands. Talking to real people, learning just enough to act, building something small and ugly fast, picking the right co-founder or none at all, protecting your time, staying flexible on the idea, and knowing your numbers is basically the entire early playbook. There's no secret founder cheat code hiding in a $30 course. Most of what actually works is unglamorous, repeatable, and slightly boring, which is probably why nobody puts it on a motivational poster. Now, statistically, most people watching this will close the tab, forget everything I just said, and go back to scrolling pitch deck templates, which is fine. That's basically the business model of this channel. But if you're one of the 4 people who's actually going to try this, the least you can do is hit subscribe so that when your startup inevitably fails, I get partial credit for the attempt.